Being confined with the haunting, unnerving sounds of the event itself, I am not... Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. But to explain that, let's head back to the beginning. Superhero movies, first-person shooter games, and any other long-running franchises are all things that start out as entertaining, but grow boring when they become repetitive. Even with new technological improvements like CGI or better frame rates, if the core experience doesn't evolve, it becomes stale. This applies across media, whether movies, shows, games, or books. Innovation must go beyond just new technology to feel fresh. To explore this, we'll examine how Five Nights at Freddy's FNAF changed with its 2019 VR adaptation. Does it effectively use new technology to innovate, or does it simply recycle the same experience? We'll analyze how the core aspects of FNAF were adapted to VR and whether this adaptation brings something new. Five Nights at Freddy's, or FNAF, is a point-and-click survival horror game, where you play as a security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Just like Chuck E. Cheese, this pizzeria has somewhat creepy-looking animatronics that entertain kids throughout the day. Unlike Chuck E. Cheese, though, when nighttime comes around, the animatronics would come to life and try to kill anyone who they could find. You, as a security guard, would have to remain trapped inside of your office as the animatronics would try to break in and kill you. The only way to fend them off being the doors you could temporarily close and the security cameras that you could track the animatronics on. Despite its outdated point-and-click mechanics and the seemingly unscary premise of getting attacked by Charles Entertainment Cheese, FNAF became successful due to its use of three core elements: atmosphere, jump scares, and what I like to call box-style horror. Atmosphere was important because the point-and-click gameplay would fail on its own to properly immerse the player, and would therefore weaken any impact or fear. The gameplay felt more like interacting with a computer than interacting with the world. This was solved by using atmosphere. The environment came to life through its intense, unsettling visuals. The camera showed just enough for your mind to play tricks on you and for things to feel off. This, paired with unnerving sound effects, would naturally bring the player to the edge of their seat. On top of all this, with the animatronics, would perfectly balance robotic and human visuals that were visually unsettling with actions that made them feel almost human, achieving an intense, uncanny valley feeling. The atmosphere was perfectly done to draw you in and keep you on the edge of your seat so that jump scares could hit you as hard as possible. Jump scares are a staple of the horror genre in both games and movies. When it comes to FNAF, their jump scares are an absolute staple of their gameplay. Whenever you'd fail to keep the animatronics back, they'd scream at you as they jump in to bite or grab you. And these jump scares garnered huge reactions from the streamers and YouTubers playing them. This led to jump scares becoming synonymous with the FNAF brand and an absolute must for any FNAF game. What I mean by box-style horror is horror that is generated through constraining the player into one single location, sort of like putting them in a box. In the original FNAF game, the box was a security office you were stuck in, where you could only interact with the doors and cameras. By keeping the player restrained to this single location, it would make the player feel trapped and helpless. It would place more weight on the limited options the player had to interact with within the office, and it would make the player feel like they were under continuous threat from the animatronics that were trying to break into the office. The VR adaptation of FNAF came out 5 years after the original FNAF, and a very successful franchise had formed. Many FNAF games came out all based around the same concept, so players were already familiar with the series formula, and it was growing stale. The creators had to adapt a 2D point-and-click survival game where the players could just interact with doors and cameras into a virtual reality game where the players could move around within a 3D environment and interact with everything. The VR adaptation of FNAF, Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, is a collection of different FNAF minigames. Half the game's direct adaptation to the original point-and-click titles, and the other half's new games with new mechanics, like fixing animatronics or repairing vents. I'll first focus on the direct adaptations and whether they innovated upon the three core elements of FNAF. In this next session, I'm going to be reading my script while playing the game in VR. My recording software didn't record my script though, so it will look like I'm constantly looking to the left for no reason. The direct adaptations of FNAF Help Wanted succeeded in improving atmosphere and failed to innovate on jump scares and box-style horror. The jump scares in no way took advantage of the 3D environment or VR mechanics. The jump scares were just better looking versions of the original that played in whatever direction you were looking. So even if you were facing a wall or the floor, it will look like the animatronics were standing in front of you, which ruined immersion. Because the innovation was purely technological, the jump scares actually became worse. As one player put it, the only part of the game that isn't scary is the jump scares. I will display this by forcing a jump scare while looking at the floor. See, it played it as if it was in front of me, but I was looking at the floor, so that makes no sense. And that's all the jump scares are in the direct adaptations. Okay? When it comes to box out horror in the original FNAF, the mechanic of clicking a button to close the door when animatronics appeared worked for the simple point-and-click game. In the VR adaptation, however, the mechanics stayed the same. The VR mechanic remained the same, relying on a single button press, despite the richer, more interactive VR controls that were available. This lack of innovation makes the game feel like a rehash of the original once the novelty of VR wears off, quickly growing stale for longtime players. A new mechanic that fully utilized VR's potential would have made for a far more innovative and engaging adaptation. The one improvement the direct adaptation had was the atmosphere. In the original 2D games, the point-and-click mechanics limited immersion. In VR, the 3D environment The only improvement from the direct adaptation was the atmosphere. In the original 2D games, point-and-click mechanics limited immersion. In VR, the 3D environment and enhanced controls pulls the player deeper into the world, making the fear feel more visceral. As one player described it, when you play FNAF VR, you feel like you're actually there. To put it simply, when you play OG FNAF, the 7-inch tall robot bear on your screen can't hurt you even if you're engrossed. When you play the VR version, though, and that same animatronic is actively looming over you and is now 7 feet tall, there's a part of you that genuinely feels like you might die. Cool. That's...
Are you having fun yet? That's great to hear.
Do not like that. When it comes to the new games found in FNAF Help Wanted, they succeeded at innovating the game's atmosphere in the same way that the direct adaptations did. They also succeed at innovating jump scares by having jump scares that are actually unique to VR, with animatronics jumping at you from within the actual 3D environment. When it comes to innovating box-style horror, though, it's complicated. While they do have new, innovative mechanics, the mechanics are so new that they step away from box-style horror. They make it so that instead of the horror coming from being constrained into a box and having that box be attacked, the horror comes from things like having to stick your hand into an animatronic's mouth and having to sneak through a dark room while being chased by an animatronic. These new mechanics are innovative, but they feel like just a VR game inspired by FNAF rather than something that innovates on what made FNAF unique. One game known as Vent Repair, however, successfully combines all three core FNAF elements while fully utilizing VR's potential. I am not going to enjoy this. In Vent Repair, you're confined to a vent with an animatronic crawling through it. The goal is to solve puzzles to repair the vent while fending off the animatronics, which can attack from multiple directions as sections of the vent open up. The jump scares are innovative, with the animatronics physically crawling towards you in 3D space. Atmospherically, the game makes you feel confined and threatened, with the haunting sounds of the animatronic crawling its way towards you being confined with the haunting, unnerving sounds of the vent itself. I am not... Okay, I originally intended to do this part also in VR, but it was impossible because I couldn't look at the script while also looking around and doing all the things required. It was also just genuinely terrifying. So instead, I'm just going to show a recording of me playing the game normally over me reading the script. With the haunting sound of the animatronic clambering its way towards you being paired with the unnerving sounds of the event itself. You also have to actively listen to the atmosphere to defend against the animatronic, with it signaling to you when it's coming. It maintains box-style horror by restricting movement and keeping you trapped in the cramped vent with limited options for survival, while also having those options be built around VR-specific mechanics. You not only have to use the full range of motion of your hands and head to progress, sticking these appendages into the vents to solve puzzles, but you also have to keep your head constantly on a swivel to look out for the oncoming animatronic, both things that are only possible in VR. Vent Repair is certainly the best game to play in FNAF I've wanted, and that's due to it using what makes FNAF unique, as well as what makes VR unique.
A perfect 72 degrees. Good job. See you next time.
When new tech is used, many improvements inherently come with it, such as the visuals in movies and the atmosphere within games. But when that's all that's improved, then it will feel soulless and unoriginal. FNAF VR shows that creativity must be used to innovate on the experience in a way that takes advantage of the new tech to create a new experience. If a new addition to an already old franchise just repeats the things from before, but with better visuals, the audience won't feel like they are getting more of their enjoyed media. They will feel like they've just paid to receive a less original rehash of media they hold dear. So whenever you are making something, keep in mind that what's ultimately more important than fancy visuals or new technology is to make something that is unique and fun. After all, FNAF initially found success in 2014 using mechanics from the 1980s because it was fun and took things in a new direction.